Thank you. Yeah, I just unashamedly, Dave, I follow on in terms of David, you'll see a fair bit of overlap, I think, between presentations such as by myself and all the scientific side of things. And I think that's an important thing which shows the integration and collaboration, but I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land the symposium is being held on, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge any traditional owners that are here in the audience today and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here. It's my pleasure to provide, I suppose, the second presentation today in terms of dedicated COTS session. And while I've worked at the GBRMPA for over 20 years, I'm relatively new in the COTS space. But I have to say I've been most heartened in my brief time in the COTS control world to learn that the partnerships between management, reef-dependent industries and science providers in that space are as strong, if not stronger, than the fisheries management space that I've worked for most of my career in the past. So just right in the outset, I just want to acknowledge the partnerships between all the research institutions, AIM, CSIRO, RRC, JCU and UQ as part of the NESP Integrated Pest Management Program, and importantly AMTO as well, and you'll hear from Cole shortly after me. So these partnerships, I cannot overstate the critical nature of them in terms of from a COTS management perspective here and now and in the past, and I can only see the need to strengthen those partnerships as we move forward in the future. So just, I think David covered off on a fair bit of this in his presentation, just about the four major outbreaks in the COTS in the 1960s. And I'll just say, over those four outbreaks now, we've got, obviously significant evolution of our understanding of the outbreaks, the methods used to control those outbreaks, and also, our perspective and how we should deal and intervene in those outbreaks. In terms of understanding the cause of the outbreaks, again, over the last 40 years, all our knowledge has evolved considerably. A range of factors that influence the development of the outbreaks. And as we know, starfish have a tendency for a boom and bust life cycle because of their life history characteristics, particularly in terms of their very high fecundity. And of course, the hydrodynamics and high interconnectivity of the reef system is also contributing to these outbreaks. So there's now a lot of evidence that in terms of human activities contributing to these outbreaks. First in terms of, you see a graph there in terms of nutrient enrichment, showing dramatically increased larval survival, and also work done in terms of the linkages, in terms of the removal of predators. Another important area that's progressed over the last 40 years in the evolution of the program has been the development of the methods to control starfish. Here we have an article in the 60s. Robert Endine was a lecturer of mine in the 80s. He never talked about this one when he lectured for me in the 80s, I can tell you. But back then, this newspaper article talks about hopes to test the secret weapons on Moreton Bay starfish early next week, but one of the hardest factors to overcome was the need for absolute waterproofing and installation to protect the divers using the electrical instruments and prohibit them from being electrocuted. Fortunately for the divers out in the program, things have evolved a fair way since then. Again, in the 80s and 90s, we had other innovative but not wholly successful methods using toxic chemicals as well. Till now we've evolved in terms of the current injection techniques. Again, all done in partnerships and a lot due to the progressive AMTO in terms of their involvement in the whole program. So in terms of the evolution of the program, I suppose spurred on by links between outbreaks with human activities and the development of feasible control methods. The first broad-scale government-funded COTS Control Program began in 2012, and again, AMTO is an important part of that program since the beginning. And during the early years, operation one vessel, and you heard from David, it was money focused a lot on tourism valued reefs in that Lizard to Cairns area. In 2015, you see RRC join, introduced the pest management approach that David was just briefly speaking on. One vessel focused on 21 reefs, Port Douglas to Cairns. Expanded to 2 vessels in January 2017, focusing on 57 priority reefs, the Port Douglas to Townsville region, and we've now evolved to a program where we're presently in the process of expanding up to 8 vessels, with 4 new vessel operators across priority reefs throughout the GBR. So it's evolved very quickly, and as we know, you would have heard a lot about in terms of the increasing pressure in terms of coral in the marine park, in terms of the impacts. It's something that's evolved over time and has become critical in terms of discussions, particularly in the last few years. The trend towards declining coral cover across the Great Barrier Reef has changed our perspective and how we should intervene and protect coral cover. When I first started in the authority 20 years ago, any thoughts in terms of proactive intervention out there? No, it's a World Heritage area. We've got to leave it alone and just control it by other means. The world has changed, and I think from a management perspective, we're very, very cognizant of that. In terms, I suppose, and catalysed on the back of the unprecedented bleaching events in 2016-17, we had a reef summit in May 2017, and out of that, in terms of 10, actions that were needed in terms of building up resilience and coral cover, COTS Control was identified as one of the 4 main on-ground actions that could contribute to the resilience of coral reefs. Again, this direct action is not meant to replace, it's meant to complement the existing efforts in terms of mitigating climate change, fisheries management, basis of the foundational aspects of zoning and improved land management. Again, complementing those measures in that regard. So where are we in terms of ramping up the COTS Control Program? Again, from that blueprint, one of the most feasible actions to reduce rates of coral decline in the GBR, and recently the Commonwealth Government's committed up to $80 million towards COTS Control in the past and now into the future. You can see those figures now through to 2024, about 24.8 million up until January 2018. And again, recently, you saw the announcement of 58 million in May 2018 to the Great Barrier Reef Foundation in terms of directly for COTS management. So we've got more control vessels and trained crews coming on board, and again, the expanded geographical scope of the program. Following on, David talked about the objectives of the COTS Control Program. Again, we want to use the best available science in order to protect coral. So again, we see that critical objectives are the protecting coral at key ecological assets and also obviously at key economic assets, which is where the program evolved from. But also we have an objective in terms of reducing the spread of the outbreak, a much more difficult task. Contrary to a lot of the media reports, our objective is not to eradicate COTS. That'd be a near impossible task, as David alluded to before, and we're not necessarily about achieving a high body count either. We have to be very strategic in the way in which we move the program forward. 3,000 reefs out there, we don't have a choice, so we choose key priority reefs to focus on our efforts, and we consider a range of information in identifying those priority reefs, including connectivity modelling predictions, tourism visitation data, current coral cover, COTS outbreak status of reefs. And recently, internally within GBRMPA, we're working with a team that's working on a resilient reef network and considering other parameters that we may consider in terms of identifying the priority reefs where we focus COTS control. And again, as David said, Carlo will be talking about some of the connectivity modelling when he arrives. And similarly, once we identify those priority reefs and controls, Integrated Pest Management research assists us. We move on, and in terms of, this is just a brief peek at some of the user interface that the pest management program's assisting us with, which Cameron Fletcher is going to talk about in the near future. We're finding that with some of the recent science in terms of coming from Morgan and colleagues, that these revisitation schedules, which we're realigning the program to, are going to be integral in terms of having more success in the program in the future. So in terms of management goals, once we've identified and optimised those voyage schedules and priority reefs, we have two management objectives that we're trying to measure and the effectiveness for the program. First is the COTS numbers below ecological sustainable thresholds, are developed through the modelling by Russ Bobcat and others at CSIRO that we utilise. And these provide our cull teams with the threshold levels of COTS culling that's required to ensure that coral growth outpaces COTS feeding. And we assess the progress using a catch per unit effort at each cull site conducted by the culling teams. In terms of our second management goals is to achieve a no outbreak status at a reef-wide level. So there are COTS numbers that need to be achieved in order to prevent significant coral damage, and we need survey data from Manito and from RIS surveys, reef health impact surveys, to assess these programs. And again, once we achieve both the culling thresholds and the no outbreak status and the reef level, we work to maintain with the control vessels the ongoing monitoring and culling visits as necessary. And again, integrated pest management guidance is critical to guiding those vessels. Important part in terms of surveillance is that's delivered by the joint Queensland Government, Australian Government Field Management Program for the Great Barrier Reef, and they deliver the 70 to 90 days at sea that provide us a comprehensive sort of data on COTS aggregations and coral cover and overall throughout different components of the parts of the Great Barrier Reef. Again, it provides strategic level data to enable us to look at the severity and the extent of outbreaks where we, up to the present time, haven't had COTS control vessels operating. For example, we've been receiving reports about high COTS outbreaks in the Swains region from commercial fishing and marine park rangers for some time, and so Field Management Program went and surveyed 76 reefs, and they found that those bottom red reefs you can see there, 90% of them had severe or active outbreaks, and these are at the far southern end of the Swains. With the status of reefs in the central and northern, we still haven't got a lot of data on. So this data from the Field Management Program, combined with AIM's long-term monitoring, is enabling us now to design where these expanded vessels are going to go to. So obviously we get a lot of data that's coming in this program, and we've had a great intern, Sam Matthews, who's been working with us to develop a data visualisation tool, and the dashboard displays the data and that we receive from all the culling vessels and also the Field Management Program, and helps us synthesise and again provide data to input in terms of we have the most responsive management decisions. So for instance, we used it to track in terms of our management goals. So in the region between Port Douglas and Cairns, where the program has been operating since 2012, of the 21 priority reefs that we have there's no outbreak status on all those reefs, and also as well they're below ecological threshold on all those reefs as well. So we still need, in terms of those COTS control vessels, to keep culling, to keep numbers down. 2 to go. Unfortunately, in the outbreak in the Cairns to Townsville region, where the really outbreak front we consider really is, after 18 months of pest management work in the program, 55% of the reef there have no outbreak status, while the other 45 have either severe, established or potential outbreak status. And in terms of 64% of those priority reefs have aggregation densities of COTS that are above the ecological thresholds and therefore require continued work on them. So it's been a really great tool that Sam's helped us develop with. So in terms of, David's winding me up, last slide. In terms of the COTS program expansion, we're presently in the process of contracting additional vessels to work up and down the reef, done through a competitive tender process over the last so many months. We're identifying new priority reefs across the GBR on the basis of Carlo's and internal work at GBRMPA. Developing coordinated voyage schedules with Integrated Pest Management scientists, training in field methods and data management, and developing, as you can see, data capture tools that links the eye and the reef database. So plenty happening in this space, and I'm unashamedly, refer to the, I suppose, the duplicity in some of the information that you received today, but it's a very big cooperative and collaborative front on the COTS Control Program. Finally there, I've got, at the same time all this is happening, we're very mindful and are working with different scientists in terms of evolving and having innovative science to improve the efficiencies of this program on the ground. It's the best we have at the moment in terms of direct control, and also exploring new control options. So at the same time all this expanded control programs rolling out, we're really mindful and trying to engage and working with all the scientists in terms of getting new innovations across that front as well. No worries, thank you.